All right, everybody's going to get a message giving their consent to record. I'm going to take notes anyway,
Okay.
just because I think it makes it a little bit more accessible for everybody than having to watch a whole meeting. But I will, and that brings us to the next point. I guess we did circulate minutes, and I guess we currently have 4 voting members of the Equity Advisory Council, which is me, Hayden, Kai, and Carolyn. So I suppose that with 3 of us here, we have a quorum so that we can vote on approving the minutes of the last meeting. But Kai was not at our last meeting, so it would not be appropriate, Kai, for you to vote on approving the minutes of a meeting you were not at. Hayden, were you at our last meeting?
Yeah, I was.
Okay. So Hayden, I'm going to make a motion to approve the minutes of our January meeting, but I need you to second me.
I second it.
Okay. Did you have any comments on the minutes or any changes that needed to be made?
No.
Okay, then let's have a vote. I vote to approve the minutes. Hayden, how do you vote? Okay, great. Minutes approved. And Kai, you're abstaining, right?
Yeah.
Great. Your first vote.
If abstaining counts.
We'll submit that to the town parliamentarian any day now. Kai, you can see that our meetings are always a lot of fun, and we are sticklers for the rules. All right, so the third item on the agenda is what we were already talking about even before the meeting started, which is we now have, by my count, 6 vacancies on the advisory council out of 10 voting members that we're supposed to have. One of the vacancies arguably is the vacancy for Human Relations Commission member, because Norma was our Human Relations Commission representative, and she is still an alternate, which I guess I will leave it up to the mayor whether that's sufficient. But I would suggest that one of the vacancies that we fill be an HRC person, because Norma's ability to commit time to this was very tenuous the last time that we spoke. I will say I do think that we've had a trend in terms of people not being able to stick with us over the last few months just because of various personal commitments, but there also seems to be some randomness to it. Norma's inability to help is very personal to her. We had a couple people move out of town. We had Kevin had to resign because he unexpectedly was called back to work in person before he was really ready to do that, and so needed to balance some time commitments. So it's there's a lot of complexity to it. I do not think it is an overall problem with our advisory council. What it is creating a problem for the advisory council, which is there are not enough of us here to really do the work that needs to be done, especially since it seems like things are picking up in the sense that we made some progress in January on a couple of things that we'll talk about, and also the mayor has been forwarding a couple of new issues that are happening in town that might need some investigation or attention of some kind. With only 4 of us, and we're all very busy people. We've got a full-time student now. And I know, Hayden, you had expressed some concern as well about your long-term ability to do this, but I appreciate you sticking with us. We just need more people.
I'm right now we're back to every other day working from home through April.
Okay.
So after April, we'll see what happens.
Okay. Well, April is only a couple weeks away, but it sounds like forever to me. So
through end of April. I mean, through end of April. So after
end of April. Okay. Well, we have you at least one more month, and we're gonna use that as best we can. The point being, I know that the last time I brought this up at the January meeting and the mayor, well, first of all, we got a new member since then. So, and thank you again for joining us, Kai. Really excited to have you here. We have not had a student member since middle of last summer, maybe last winter. So we're excited about that. We're excited about what you can report to us from the high school. But I guess, Mayor, you had suggested that we wait until the spring comes to try to really do a recruiting push for these vacancies. Spring is next week, so where are we?
So here's a thought. Harry, if we could build into my remarks for tomorrow night's council meeting, something about the, what the Equity Advisory Council was formed to help do, and put out a call for volunteers who are interested in that area. Let's do that. So one of the things that, Jeff, I've expressed this too, is we're seeing this across the board on all boards and commissions these days. So Harry, I'm going to look to you again. Perhaps there's a campaign we can come up with to help sort of stimulate interest in becoming a volunteer in Highland Park. And then we can list the boards and commissions that have openings, but I wouldn't list them all necessarily, even if there's just like one open spot. I would stick with the commissions that have the most openings right now. Let's get those filled in some way.
Good.
Is there anything that you would like us to do as members of the Equity Advisory Council to assist you in recruiting people? I mean, obviously, we've all been sort of instructed over the months to reach out through our networks and see if anybody's interested. And I think we've been doing that a little bit. But is there anything, I mean, first of all, I will say, I think I'm correct that we're not limited to one student member. So Kai, if you know people in the student community who have an interest in these issues that we deal with, you're very welcome to put the word out. And, more than one student member is fine. Students are people too, as far as we're concerned here in Highland Park.
We're also residents.
Yes. And so that's one thing that we can all do, is just reach out through whatever networks we have. But is there anything else you need us to do or want us to do? Did you need us to put together something? I'm not volunteering to do this, but did you need us to put together something describing what we do in a way that makes it more enticing to go with Harry's report? Or
Yeah, I think that would be a good thing. And also, Harry, maybe on our borough Facebook page, we can have Jeff as the chair of this board do a video and talk about, stop laughing, Jeff, and talk about what the Equity Advisory Council was formed to do, and maybe do a plea there. And, not sounding like desperate, but I think it would be good coming from a resident and the chair of the commission or council, as opposed to coming from me. I mean, I'll do my
I would be
thing.
happy, despite my laughter, I'd be happy to do it. I would suggest that maybe, since we are, one of our sort of ad hoc functions at times is supposed to be, at least will maybe in the future, helping gather a more diverse and representative group of volunteers for all of the boards and commissions.
Yes.
Then maybe I can include that in the video, that we really want to have boards and commissions that are representative of all of the communities of Highland Park, and that we can only do that if we can get volunteers. And but having said that, I don't know if that message will resonate particularly well coming from me personally. Maybe there is somebody who could, also, help with that. I don't know who, I don't know who, I mean, maybe somebody from the HRC. We can put together something together about that particular point. I don't know. All right, Jeff may do a video. I just realized that one of the things that happens when I'm taking notes at the same time that I'm sort of moving the meeting along is that I start talking to myself. Okay, so the other thing I would just note as I accidentally close my Zoom, is on the agenda, I mentioned the advisory council vacancies as well as a co-chair vacancy. I would say, just Mayor, as you're recruiting people, we really could use somebody on this particular advisory council to help share the leadership functions of the council.
Yeah.
Because I mean, my work schedule just fluctuates a whole lot. And
Right.
I know right now I'm in a particular busy period. And so having somebody helping to just do some of the organizational communication and things like that, like Antoinette used to do during the time she was my co-chair, would be particularly helpful. So if we can get a super volunteer who will help do more than the ordinary, that would be great.
Yeah. Let me, I have a couple of people in mind, so let me try to reach out to them
Perfect.
this week.
I want to shoehorn into the agenda another, well, first of all, I don't, Kai and Hayden, I don't mean to exclude you at all from the discussion. If there's something that you wanted to say about adding more people to the council, pipe up whenever you want. I'm just trying to move along the agenda items, so.
That's fine.
Okay. So our next agenda item is about the meeting that we had with the mayor of Maplewood. But before we do that, I think our mayor had a couple of items that she wanted to add to the agenda. And I think now is as good a time as any. I think one of them was about an incident in Woodbridge, maybe?
Yes. I received a call from the NAACP the other day asking me if I had a chance to watch the video of the last council meeting in Woodbridge. Apparently, there's a very active Proud Boys group that has started attending the Woodbridge Council meetings. And certainly there's been cause for concern there. The reason they reached out to me is that they're concerned that it may start there and start working its way into other municipalities in Middlesex County. So I was going to suggest that you might want to take a look at the video. It's online. I can, if I haven't already sent it to you, Jeff, I can.
You did send it to me. I can circulate it.
Yeah, that would be great. It was somewhat concerning, given that we know from the time we had that walk a few years ago, there were folks who live in Highland Park or on the Edison Highland Park border who followed along with the walk and were sort of harassing people on the walk. So I'm just putting it out there to this group, just to make you aware that this is something that's bubbling up in Middlesex County.
What, I have not watched the video because I got it while I was at work, and I try not to watch videos at work. Was there, I mean, did they disrupt the meeting? Did they, this was an in-person?
In-person meeting, which, by the way, the council, I'm considering going back to our in-person meetings in April. That's not official yet. We're watching the numbers and the numbers, COVID I'm talking about. The numbers and hospitalizations and deaths are all trending down, which is continuing, and that's a good thing. And I'm feeling very strongly the need to go back in person. What we have to resolve, and I have to make up my mind, and I could use some input from you on this actually, is whether we should also be Zooming the meetings. To do that, I may have to hire someone because I can't ask the borough administrator to both conduct the meetings, answer the phones, and make sure the video and the audio is working. I would prefer to have people, if you're interested in speaking, come and talk at the meeting. The meetings would, of course, be videotaped the way they had been in the past, and available both on the borough's website and HPTV. But I'm, on the other side, a little concerned that our residents have gotten used to watching on Zoom, which does actually make it more available to folks who don't want to watch it on HPTV or don't want to come to the council meetings. So you don't have to answer me right now. The next meeting is totally on Zoom tomorrow. But I'd like to have a plan in place if I'm going to go back to in-person, and whether it should be just in person or in person in Zoom. So I'd be interested in your thoughts.
Well, I know you don't necessarily want an answer right now, but I will say, I mean, so is this on the agenda for tomorrow night?
No.
Okay. I mean, to me, I mean, particularly because there are so few of us, but I don't feel like, I mean, I will say I have not been able to attend in person, or, well, obviously I haven't been able to attend in person, but I haven't been able to even make the time to go to Zoom meetings over the last probably 6 months or more. But I did, I will say during the early stages of doing Zoom meetings, there did seem to be a lot of interest in particular meetings, and then people who might not have wandered all the way over to Borough Hall were able to just sort of log on and follow it and discuss things on Facebook and things like that as the meetings were going on. I thought it was general, there were obviously some negatives that you had to experience, but there were some positives. I don't know. I am not at all comfortable speaking for the general population of Highland Park in terms of people's comfort level, but I will say what would make me comfortable as a resident is if you're thinking about an issue that does bear on sort of transparency and access and inclusion of people in meetings, then the minimum step that I would like to see is, put it on the agenda of whatever the next meeting is. Make some effort to call attention to the fact that it's on the agenda and invite people to talk about whether they want to see Zoom meetings continue and hear what they have to say. Which is not to say, obviously, that you have to listen to every individual person, but you might get a better sense of whether people really care at all about continuing Zoom. But I know, I've read in general that there's been some increase in sort of public participation because of the availability of Zoom meetings. I don't know whether that was true in Highland Park or not. It seems like it's been pretty
in the beginning, it seemed like there were more people attending, but now it's certainly drifted off, except for the people interested in cannabis or that sort of thing.
You could also see, since we have the Zoom capability, you could also see some opening for, if there's a particularly hot issue that you want to make sure people are able to attend in a large scale, to do it especially for one meeting, or if somebody you could make it kind of like people can request to be on an email list to be notified about meetings and things like that. if people make a request to stream a particular meeting and be able to participate live, maybe that wouldn't be quite as much of a burden on somebody. I think I would just love to hear what people have to say about it, because I mean, some people obviously are not going to have the same COVID comfort level as the
Right.
general public until they feel comfortable. And whereas I would probably be comfortable going to an in-person meeting at this point, I don't know. I just seeing the chatter online, that's not a universal sentiment.
Right. No, absolutely not. And it's not a decision I have to make today or tomorrow. I do know that, in come April, the council chambers will have been cleaned and could be used
Mhm.
for the meeting. But that doesn't mean that it can't, we'd have to, I'm really bad with the technology on this, but in order to then also Zoom it and have people both call in and be present to ask questions, all of that would have to be worked out. And I'm sort of feeling like I might have to hire a separate person to do all of that on Tuesday nights. But
Well, I'm not available, but Kai or Hayden, did you have any thoughts on this?
It seems to me from like I belong to a couple like parenting clubs and some other organizations, and Zoom did increase participation a lot in terms of my other extracurricular activity participations. The parenting club, for example, we have a monthly meeting, and normally we have maybe about, if we have 20 people to participate on site, it's a big number. Since we went to Zoom, we have like 200. That's the average. So and another organization I belong to in New York City, before a monthly meeting is like a long trek, to the upper west side, and it's a whole evening commitment. Now it's just do it on Zoom, and you can listen to it while you eat dinner, and so it did increase a lot more participation based on my experience. So
I'm wondering, Harry, can we get a historic look at the number of people attending the council meetings on Zoom?
I could ask.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, what was it? Something Hayden said that struck a chord, but I don't. Well, I will say, it definitely enables more casual participation, which it sounds pejorative because it's like, oh, you're only casually interested in what's going on at the count, but you don't see people going to back in the olden days, you did not see people popping into a borough council meeting and then just sort of, unless they were there to receive an award or make a, then they wouldn't just be popping in for 10 minutes and then popping out.
Well,
and I mean, to me, as a sort of absolutist on this, I love to see that from people who are slightly less engaged than the people who are like, always at every meeting and sitting in the front row, to see a more, like I remember there were meetings where I couldn't possibly have gone that evening, but I was like, I put in a headphone or something and sort of listened to it through one ear while I was also eating dinner or something. So I like that aspect. I have been in meetings. That's what I was going to say, is I have been in meetings for legal stuff where some of the people were attending in person and some people were attending on Zoom. And I'm not going to say it was perfect, but it was being generally facilitated in a fairly competent way by people who were also like monitoring the in-person, handling the in-person aspects of things. And these are people that I would not say are like overall the most organized people that I've ever had organized, like I've dealt with them when they were just doing the in-person stuff and they're not that great at what they do. But I can say that because you don't know any of them. They're in Ohio. But the point is, I don't think it would be that as unwieldy as you might think. Easy for me to say since I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
What would be difficult is enabling remote participation and question, asking questions and making statements in the public comment part from Zoom when everybody else is in person.
Right.
And that part, I don't know whether hiring an extra person is really going to help you that much. I think it's just hard to do that. But it's worth looking into if people are saying that's what it would take to get us to participate, because I think participation is something that we should all want.
Yes, true. Harry, maybe that's something you could look into with Terry on what's going to be involved if we do a hybrid kind of situation.
I know that Terry is investigating it, as is Monica. So they're looking into what other towns are doing and what the Board of Ed is doing. So that they're actively looking into that.
Okay.
Do we still
I
have?
remember that.
Go ahead, Dave.
There are also a few years ago, I mean, there were a couple of hot topics in Highland Park, and I remember attending a couple of council meetings where it's so full that you couldn't even get in. We end up just sitting in the hallway. So having Zoom as an alternative technology, at least make a hybrid, I think that would allow more participation, because there are times where, you just stand outside in the hall.
Yes.
I have stood outside in the hall for some of those. I would say, so the mayor is saying, oh yeah, we should be able to increase public participation at our very worst meetings. But what I was going to ask next is, do we still have in town a communications?
Well, that's part of the
commission?
problem.
Okay.
We have Harry's our public information officer, but the volunteer group has pretty much fallen apart.
Okay, I was going to say, because it might be worthwhile to ask them.
Yeah.
But I guess we can be them too. All right, I was just about to turn. Kai, did you have anything to say on this topic?
I essentially agree. I mean, I think that the Zoom would be a good idea. I don't think I've ever been to a council meeting before.
I
Also,
didn't want to put you on the spot. I was gonna ask, but it's always interesting to ask a high school student if they've ever been to a borough council meeting.
I mean, I wouldn't be like sitting on a Tuesday and be like, you know what, I'm gonna go walk to the borough hall and attend a council meeting right now. I mean, I guess I would probably like have go with my parents or something, but my parents are usually working. But the school does send, I don't think it's council meetings. I think it's Board of Ed meetings that the school sends emails about. So I don't know how high student engagement is at these meetings. I would guess probably not very high. So like, so I would guess like maybe one way that if you wanted to increase student participation, which I don't really know because I don't really know how involved students are in local issues, maybe one way you could do that is have the school email not just about Board of Ed, but also borough meetings, like to attend on Zoom. Because I feel like also kids would do that too. Because it is convenient, it makes people who might not want to travel or people who are in another situation would be able to join. But also if you're like a student and don't want to be in a room with a bunch of people you don't know by yourself, but you still want to participate. And also if you like had questions in chat, like as I said, I don't really know how it.
Yeah, we
has
don't do
functioned in
the
past.
chat thing because it's just too, it would
People
take.
can get kind of abusive in chat.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes
more
sense.
so than if they are forced to say things out loud, I think. But yeah, I think it's a good point. I think it'd be great if the schools would push the meetings to the students the way they do. I've seen students engaged at Board of Ed meetings, and I think it's always a good thing to hear from them. Obviously, there are less issues that directly affect students at the borough council meeting, but they, in the same sense that we've been talking about, that students are residents and people, they do affect you the same way they affect us.
You should know that I have a group of high school students that meets prior to COVID that met with me monthly, the mayor's teen advisory council. So Kai, if you're interested, I have to have the principal of the high school get word out again about all of this.
Yeah, I am actually the treasurer of that.
Okay, there you go. I was going to say that name, so I'm so familiar to me.
Yes, I'm on that.
Okay. So I don't know, you probably want to talk with Harry. He had to run off for a second about rescheduling or scheduling a meeting now that we're sort of coming out of COVID?
Yeah. Wait, you mean a meeting for the Teen Advisory Council?
Yeah,
Yeah, that is not, I don't want to like branch too off topics. I'll keep it brief, but I believe like the person who was like the advisor of that left. And so now there was supposed to be a meeting that happened, but then it didn't happen because we don't really have like a head anymore. So that's why we haven't met in a while. And like we have a Slack chat, where we talk, but like people will say there's going to be a meeting and then like no Zoom link gets sent. So like it just doesn't happen. So I feel like it's the reverse issue where like that there is here, where there are people who want to be in it, but there's no like leader or like, yeah, who's like can organize things. Where here it's kind of like the other way around.
well, let's try to fix that.
Yeah.
If you have suggestions on how I can make that happen, let me know who I need to talk to.
I mean, I don't know what the policy is, like if that could be just purely student run, because I know that previously I believe it was a college student who was overseeing things.
Well, yeah, she was my intern.
Mhm.
And so, that part of her responsibility was making sure you guys met regularly, but I have no intern right now.
Yeah, I'm sure that we could meet on our own. I don't really like that could happen. If that's okay, I don't know.
Yeah, well, Harry can help you coordinate all of that. We're talking about getting the Mayor's Teen Advisory Council back working with us, Harry.
So they are meeting. Because they did meet previously, Mayor. The Mayor's Teen Advisory is, they're decent with numbers and activity.
So
I think there were, yeah, there was one like it was like a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Well, I don't want to get off on a tangent with that. Sorry, Jeff.
No, that's okay. It's an interesting tangent because I think that it's part of the same thing. I mean, when you talk about people who are more inclined to participate sort of sporadically or casually or only in bite-sized pieces when they're interested in a particular issue, I would say stereotypically students are sort of at the top of the list. I mean, we would see students participate when you were talking about hiring a new police chief. There would at least be one or two. And I've seen, a couple here and there attend meetings, but I think everybody should be more informed and more engaged in what's going on in town. And that's it, it's something I just think it would be good to have a discussion, especially since you yourself seem to be a little bit, I don't want to say uncertain, but I guess uncertain about, what you want to see happen next in terms of once the in-person meetings start. Maybe do whatever we can to get some input from the public rather than saying, okay, this is what we're going to do. And then have the public, the angry members of the public will then start complaining about it. Like, let's see what people think. But that's also a universal statement that I would always say about anything that you put to us. Maybe not that valuable for me to say. So anything else on this issue from anyone? I guess I want to go back for a second because I wasn't sure. I mean, if it turned out that a white supremacist group decided to start attending in-person meetings in Highland Park, I think that would be bad. I want to make that clear, but I'm also a little confused about other than if they're, preventing the meetings from occurring in a smooth way or causing, violence or things like that, or inciting violence at the meetings. I'm not sure what we or anyone could really do about it or even do to prepare for it.
We could
Well-
research what's being done in other towns.
Yeah. You know,
Did Woodbridge do something in response to all of this? Do we know?
If you watch the video, it was very disappointing.
Mhm.
Because, you know, people from the audience were asking the mayor to say something and he actually refused to talk. This mayor wouldn't refuse to talk, but I also have to be guided by, you know, our borough attorney on what I can and cannot say. What I
Right.
do say at the very beginning of every meeting is that I have the authority to ask to stop someone from talking if they become abusive, or if they become violent, or if they say things that are hurtful to other people. You know, so I'm covered for that. I think there was the opportunity to do that at that meeting, but you know, I suggest if anybody has time and they're interested, they should watch the video of that meeting. I Googled Woodbridge Council meeting and Proud Boys.
Yeah,
And-
I forwarded your YouTube link to everybody now.
Okay, good.
So they should be able to watch it, and I guess we can, you know, suggest any ideas once we've all watched it.
Okay.
Hopefully it won't come to that.
Yeah.
All right, so the next,
Hi, this is
Everyone-
Elsie. I just want to chime in a little bit on that.
sure.
Hi, Elsie.
Hi, I've been listening. I've just been in transit. So I'm finally in my house now. But I do want to chime in and say what, you know, because the Proud Boys, the last piece that you guys saw publicly was when they showed up at the council meeting. But Councilmember Kyle Anderson has been their target for over a year now. And he's the only African-American on Woodbridge Town Council. And away from them showing up at his kids' games and other activities, they have been hounding him for a while. They just took it to the town meeting, the town council meeting now to take it to the next level. I am very concerned that we might have a similar thing here in town. And I think that I would love to hear if there's anything that this group can or maybe suggest that we could do, because I know freedom of speech, everybody have to have their freedom of speech, and that's all good. But I am also very concerned because this guy has been going through this at least a year and a half, 2 years or more. And they just decide to, for lack of a better term, take off the sheet and come out and and show their face at the council meeting and just let everybody know who they are.
Yeah.
And he has 2 boys that plays in sport. They show up at these kids' game and they act out like this. And they, as they say, it's a public game. Anybody can show up, but when they get there, it's what they say and, you know, how they behave. Worse than what you saw in the council meeting. I would love to hear anything that anybody from this group have to input.
Well, off the cuff, without having watched the video, does anybody have any suggestions? I don't know. I mean, maybe because I'm a lawyer in another state, but I'm really antsy about talking about it without hearing what the borough attorney has to say about what the restrictions are, because it's, you know, obviously the kind of harassment that you're talking about, Elsie, is horrific and might be a police issue. And obviously it would be disappointing if that happened to you in a meeting and the mayor just sat there and didn't do anything about it. That would be additionally horrific. And I know that, you know, if it happened here, it would not be the first time that you in particular have been targeted by people because of your race. So I don't want to add a but to the end of that. So that's all I mean, that's all I can say is
No, I was
it would be
hoping
terrible, especially, but I don't know what the limits are of what anyone can do to prevent somebody from attending based on, concerns about what they may have to say or what they will say. And even if what they say is going to be hateful and, then what can you do other than respond to it if it crosses the line into illegal conduct? But that's a pretty, that's a pretty weak response to what you're describing. So I don't know. I mean, Kai or Hayden, if you had any ideas about what kinds of things we might be looking into, but I will say, Harry, sorry, I keep just saying, oh, if somebody else has an idea, and then I just keep talking. But Harry, you suggested we look into what other towns are doing. I don't, I'm hesitant only because, as we talked about earlier in the meeting, we hardly even have members of a mayor's equity advisory council. Our next agenda item is something that is like the core focus of what we are doing here, and we barely have the bandwidth to like make any progress on that month to month. So I'm not sure who I would assign a research project to say, hey, look at all of the municipalities in New Jersey and how are they handling hate speech at their meetings. I just don't know whether we have the capacity to do that.
I mean, I think we do have to rebuild capacity first, but that would seem a very smart approach to it, is to, look at other towns, maybe speak with the Southern Poverty Law Center about, is this happening in other places and what are some successful responses?
I think also, team, I do have relationships through the mayor's organization of New Jersey, and I could certainly put it out there and see what folks are doing. But as I said, when I first brought this up about Woodbridge, I wouldn't necessarily follow what other mayors are doing because frankly, I don't think they're doing enough in most cases. So, so while I think it's probably good to hear, how other mayors are approaching it, it is not necessarily what the direction I would take for Highland Park. So,
just
Well,
one. Sorry.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Kai.
I haven't seen the video. This is the first time that I've heard of it. And I'm going to. But I quickly found, I read an article on it, and I just did a quick Google search. Obviously, it's not very comprehensive. But I found that at least there were some issues in New Hampshire with hate speech at in like meetings at certain municipalities, and one of the things that was brought up there was Minnesota State Board for Community Colleges v. Knight, which was Supreme Court decision in 1984, which says that the Constitution does not grant members does not grant to members of the public generally a right to be heard by public bodies making decisions of policy. So, like, you, even with freedom of speech, you don't necessarily, you're not like owed the right to be able to say whatever you want at a town meeting. Like, there are limits to that, and like you can implement limits to that. So even if you don't have to necessarily wait for someone to do something illegal or harmful or hateful to do something. Like, I'm sure that there are preventative measures.
so and
That's an interesting point, Kyle. Sorry, Mayor, you had something to say about it.
and that's part of the reason at the beginning of each meeting, as I mentioned before, I read off the fact that I can stop someone from talking if what they're saying is hurtful, destructive, damaging, that whole thing.
And my understanding is that statement is based on what the borough attorney has advised is sort of the outer limit of what the borough can do, not because of the federal constitutional right to be heard in a public meeting, which is what was at issue in that, but because of New Jersey's Open Meetings Act, which gives, some greater rights than what the Constitution would give. So it is more complicated, and it is, I'm not a New Jersey lawyer, but I have looked at it a little bit, and I think we need to know. I think one of the reasons why it's helpful to look at what other New Jersey municipalities are doing about it is they have to deal with the same kind of legal framework that the mayor and the council have to deal with. And but you know, that stuff is always evolving. So,
I could also ask the borough attorney to look at the video and advise if it happened here.
yeah, I mean, I think it's a great case study for the borough attorney to say like, okay,
Yeah.
what would be the most that I
pick
could
up-
do in that situation?
Right. I'll talk to him.
And what, you know, once you find out what the most is, then obviously we're always happy to kick around with as little or as much information as we have, what we think should happen.
Absolutely.
Anything else, Hayden or Kai?
Well, I mean, just a general observation in like the group, extreme right-wing groups like the Proud Boys and things like that. I mean, what fuels them are these hot button cultural issues, right? And you know, nowadays, you know, it's for somebody who come from communist China, okay, you know, where it's run by dictators, you know, for like years and years. I mean, what scares me about this country is that it's going toward a world of, you know, cult of personality that, you know, that I thought I only saw in a communist country that I'm seeing in this country. And so it seems to me, from someone who come from you know, a dictatorship, a totalitarian society, is that, you know, it's that even for, I guess we're all liberals here, even for liberals like us, you know, I think we have to take away the fuel that fuels these extreme right-wing groups and focus on the bread and butter issues that affects everyone's lives, as well as the basics, such as what is the truth, you know, what is democracy, you know. I mean, when the foundation of democracy is cracking, and that, you know, that if I don't know. I mean, I have debates with my colleagues and coworkers and friends who are on the other side of the group. You know, I mean, and some of them are actually right extreme. You know, who are strong, basically Trump supporters, and we cannot even agree what the facts are. You know, that's scary to me. You know, in a democracy, if you cannot even agree what the facts are, and have a common shared understanding, you don't have a democracy.
Right.
And it seems to me this country is going the way of going, you know, if easily, something I never believed for 40 years in this country, that this country can easily gone the way of a totalitarian dictatorship. And if Trump wins again, we could easily become a dictatorship.
That's
And
why we
that's
all have
scary.
to fight against him doing that, winning.
Right. So, but what fuels him are all these hot button cultural issues that we need to take away the fuel, basically, to you know, take away from the forest from burning up. You know, you gotta take away the dry wood, basically.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how to say, I mean, how to implement it, but I mean, that's just an observation.
It is incredible though, just looking at I mean, and I agree with everything that you said, Hayden. Obviously, it's, you know, it's terrifying to see this stuff. And I do think that there are certain issues that when the borough council takes them up, they become hot buttons. But I've been interested and fascinated by the fact that even the most banal issues sometimes that come up in town just excite the same kinds of, you know, they become hot button issues without necessarily being intended that way. But I do think I mean, I think it's an interesting point, is that, you know, there's been a lot of discussion over the last few years about, you know, what should the borough council be focusing on, and, you know, are we pulling focus from the important issues of potholes and taxes and things like that when the council talks about frankly some of the issues that we talk about in this council. But that is one of the things, is that if you start to take on these issues, then you do start to attract people who are malevolent. But
I just want to say that, you know, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. So these are issues that are important to most of us in Highland Park. We can focus on them, but still get the potholes fixed. So, and I think, that's something we've been doing over the last, I don't know how long, since, as somebody brought up since he's been in office. So,
Well, there's still a lot of potholes, but
every winter there are more.
yes. So I would be interested. I think we should continue having this kind of discussion, particularly once we have more members who can do some more research, and particularly once the borough attorney has sort of weighed in about what the limits are of being able to address these issues. But hopefully we have the time to do that before people turn their attention on our little borough. So it's getting a little on the late side, but so I want to jump to the next agenda item unless somebody wants me to stop. Hearing no objection. The next item on the agenda was just sort of a debrief from our discussion with the mayor of Maplewood that we had in January. And I felt, I wish that we'd been able to follow up a little bit more quickly, since it seems like a distant memory at this point. But I got pretty sidetracked in January, and then we didn't have a February meeting. I thought we heard some really interesting things from the mayor of Maplewood. And in particular, the main focus was what we had asked him to talk to us about, which was their effort to create a civilian review board, which we had decided, despite the fact that we were an hour into the meeting and we haven't even started talking about it, we decided that that was going to be the main focus of this body a few months back, particularly because the legislature had not made any progress on it. And I'm saying that a lot of this just to sort of catch up Kai, who has not attended any of this. But, when we first started, we were thinking the legislature was going to do something dramatic to increase our ability to create a civilian review board that would have the real teeth to oversee the activities of the police department. And that effort seemed to have stalled in the legislature. I think it's still stalled. I hadn't heard anything to the contrary. I'm not sure anything's happening on that. So in the absence of legislative action, we're very limited in terms of what we can do to create a civilian review board, which is the mayor has expressed an interest in doing. So what we wanted to find out was, what are towns of our size doing to establish police oversight within the current restrictions of the law? And the example that we had heard about a number of times was Maplewood. And so we met with the mayor. He made himself very flexible to give us time to ask a lot of our questions. And he indicated there actually was not a civilian review board in Maplewood. I'm not sure if I think it may have just started.
He had a community board of police.
Yeah, they had started with
analyze traffic stops and look at other data. But then at some of the public meetings, the public said, we want certainly a civilian community review board. Mm-hmm. So they have both.
So it was a body. I think it was something in between what we are doing and what the prior version of this, the Equity Commission, was doing. They put together a group like that. It was much bigger. It was much more active, and it had a little bit more sustained focus than our groups have had. But that had sort of morphed in part into a civilian review board. And what they did was, especially as I looked into it a little bit after we talked, they basically adopted a version of a civilian review board that exactly matches the guidelines that came out last year from the Attorney General's office, which allows a civilian review board limited access to investigative files from the police department, internal investigative files from the police department, after discipline has already been decided one way or the other, decided to discipline or not to discipline an officer. The members of the civilian review board have to sign like a confidentiality agreement, and they're not permitted to share what they see with anybody else. but they are allowed to take the information that they collect and report to the borough council about it, and publicize sort of general trends in what they see. So for instance, if they are generally dissatisfied at the end of a quarter or a year or something with what they're seeing in terms of the internal investigations, they can make that public. And in Maplewood, the Civilian Review Board consists, I believe, I'm going by memory instead of by Harry's notes, but I believe it consists of 3 people out of the entire, police oversight, whatever, police community advisory group or whatever that they have. And those 3 people are the ones who have to sign the confidentiality agreement. They're not even allowed to share what they see with the other members of the police group. But it was interesting, and I think it's an interesting thing for particularly when we have more members to kick around and we have a more sort of like, a full set of people to talk through these issues. I think it's an interesting question to me. The question that I came away from that meeting with was, okay, this is an incredibly limited form of police oversight. It is, compared to what you can do in a lot of other states in terms of civilian review board with subpoena power and civilian review boards who can do simultaneous investigations and before discipline is decided and can weigh in on discipline. And particularly compared to my experience doing civil rights law in a state where internal affairs files can be accessed not just when they're done, but while they're still going on by the public without hardly any restrictions. It's extremely limited. But would it be, for us in Highland Park, a gigantic step forward, because we would at least have the framework of a group that is learning how to do civilian oversight of a police department, is learning what one of the things that we've asked for since the beginning of this advisory council is to have a group of us be able to review police investigative files. And we were told by the borough attorneys that that was not possible under any circumstances based on guidance that they got from the county prosecutor, which I think was guidance that was issued before the attorney general stepped in and established guidelines for doing civilian review. It seems like it would be at least something that we could do. And I think of these things as in practical terms. I think of them in terms of, just the purpose to me of police oversight is to make sure that the police department knows that somebody is performing oversight, because they will conform their behavior to the expectation that somebody is going to see what they've done. Similar to the way that you see police behave at least slightly better when they know that they have their body camera on. I kind of like the idea that somebody would be able to look at even after the fact, that somebody would be able to look at this stuff and weigh in on it, even if it isn't impacting individual disciplinary decisions in those particular cases. I don't think it's very complicated. It literally would just be a matter of implementing what the Attorney General's office has said is okay. The question is the resources that we would put into that, the kinds of, and I'm really talking about person time because we have such a limited amount of people who are interested in doing this kind of thing. Would it just not, would it end up sucking up a lot of effort that would be better focused on something else? But anyway, that was my reaction. The other reaction that I had was the mayor of Maplewood, before going into the civilian review part of things, mentioned a couple of different initiatives that I thought were possibly even more interesting. One of which involved implementing like a true crisis intervention team model, where they were trying to incorporate more social worker and psychiatric response to 911 calls, and there was another item that he mentioned that's probably in the notes that jumped out at me as something else that we might want to look at down the line. So those were my overall reactions to the meeting. I think the mayor was Mayor Maplewood, I mean, it was pretty open about saying that he was available to answer more of our questions down the line. And Hayden, were you able to go to that meeting?
No,
Okay, so I'm the only one who attended it. So I was just yammering on about it, but I don't know, Mayor, what your reaction was to that whole thing?
So Elsie, I believe, is still on the call.
Yes, I am.
Okay. Do we already have a crisis intervention team that working with Rutgers Behavioral Health?
Yes, we do. The answer is yes, we do. However, since we have discovered this morsel and we've put this in place, Highland Park was the first place to get this resource available. Other towns have now tapped in. So because that has happened, when we call, it's not necessarily we would get someone right away. Sometimes it's a couple of hours later, sometimes it's a day later. But we used to be able to have someone, I would say, within 4 hours. It's not so much readily available now because everyone has the same concern, everyone has the same need. And so we are, even with our public safety meeting, we have been having discussions on how to make this happen. Let me put my face on camera. We've been having discussions on how do we put it aside money in our budget? Is that what needs to happen? Is there any kind of funding source where we can get to pay for services such as this? So it's something that we are actively exploring of how to make this happen, to have not necessarily a social worker that's a police officer that's attached to the police department, but to have this resource when someone calls and they're in distress and what have you. For example, you guys may have heard me say this a million times, that we have a lot of EDPs in town, emotionally distressed calls. And we had in 1 month, in 20 days, that one person called 14 times. They had to show up. The first aid squad and police officers had to show up at one house 14 times in 20 days. So we get this, it's an ongoing thing. And it's not say, okay, it's gonna happen between the hours of 8 and 4:30. You know, it's sporadic when it does happen. So we are trying to look at how do we provide resources to address this issue when these calls are made, because they can be made at any given time. I know I went on a long time. I blabbed a lot.
That's good.
No, it's complicated, and that's why I mentioned that the way that it was described to us, and you have to always look at this with a sort of a little bit of skepticism, because it's very popular for towns to claim that they have a crisis intervention team in their police department, and then when you look at it, what really happened was some of the officers went down and got crisis intervention training, but that just makes the police department think that those officers are social workers, or they are psychiatrists or whatever, and so that it's okay for them to respond with a gun and a badge because they've taken a class or they went to a class for a week or something like that. And so I don't, we need to look into, and I know in Highland Park, I'm sorry, see, I want to say, I want to be careful about it, because I was basing what I said on what you've described to us before in our meetings about the fact that we have the resource available, sort of, and it's been less available as the years have passed since the agreement was made. And what I'm really interested in, Maplewood is a town that is, somewhat similar in size to us.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know whether, I think it's worth looking into whether they've found some more reliable way to incorporate a non-police response into their 911 response, and whether it's something that we should be looking at. So maybe I said that a little bit ham-fistedly the first time, but I'm not saying we don't have something, but theirs sounded a little bit more comprehensive than ours.
Well, in response to that, or in addition to that, I should say, we have a social worker in the Department of Community Services, that if it's between the hours of 8 to 4:30 and something comes up, and we've also sent our officers for these kind of training. However, we are not relying on our officers to be social worker or psychiatrists or therapists. That's a totally different area. That's not what they're there for. And, to me, additional funding is needed to provide the kind of go along service that it would be required, especially in a town where we have a huge number of emotionally disturbed persons because of the various homes that are here, that it seemed like all of a sudden there's an avalanche of these homes, these group homes, and we have a lot of persons in those homes that have issues, away from that, everybody else who has issues. But although our police have received training, we're not relying on them to do that work. What I'm trying to seek is for specific funding that would be available to provide a therapist to ride along on some of these rides, that when these calls come in, that we would have someone.
And there's two items that we've already looked at. I'm sorry, go ahead, Mayor.
Elsie, did you put in for that in this year's budget?
Yes, not specifically, because we need to it's kind of a challenging thing, because we're looking at it to say, yes, we need a budget for this. We need to put in the budget, but we need to, for example, 24 hours, we need to have someone who's available, say, on call for 24 hours when this happens. And those are the kind of things that we have to look into when we look at the budget and say, how do we make this work? Who would be that person that would be available whenever a call comes in? It's like a fire call. You never know when it's going to happen, but you have to have the resources there. And, so we're looking at the budget, and we continue to discuss this in public safety, say, okay, how much money do we need? What type of person do we need? How do we allocate this resource, that resource to make this happen? It's an ongoing process.
Yeah. And I'm going to have to get off because I have a 7:30 I have to prepare for. But
I have a clock that I'm I'm late for.
So Jeff,
do you have a minute before you log off, just to tell, because I know I heard sort of a reaction to that part, but maybe we can talk about it at our next meeting. I just didn't know what your reaction was to what we heard from Maplewood in terms of the civilian review, and whether it's something you want us to keep looking into, or whether you felt like it was just too unwieldy.
I'm just wondering if this group can in some way morph or take on, and the way that the Maplewood folks are doing things in terms of after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something else we would need to talk with the chief about and let him know this is what we want to see happen. But Jeff, that's something you need to think about as the chair of this group. And would it be just a subcommittee of this group? Let's say you, Hayden, and Carolyn, just because whatever.
There's only so many subcommittees you can make when there are 4 of us.
So
and maybe that's a good place. Maybe that's a good place to stop. I think that's a really interesting idea. That would be basically the Maplewood model.
Right.
It's just that we need to fill this council, hear their thoughts, hear the thoughts of whoever fills the council about this, and get figure out who that subcommittee would be once we have a full membership.
Yeah. So something to think about before the next meeting. It'd be great if we could get the date and time of the next meeting out pretty quickly, so that maybe we can get more of your committee able to attend.
I mean, they all knew when this is our regular meeting time.
Okay.
So I don't want to make too many excuses for them.
Okay.
We're not even missing it. We're missing one person. That's the sad truth about what's going on with this advisory council is we don't have enough members. And so if we're missing one person, we're missing a quarter of the group.
Right.
But I do also, I know Franklin was the one who is most interested in this issue. He was not able to attend the meeting in Maplewood. I haven't had a chance to talk to him about it. He's still an alternate. Norma is also incredibly interested in this particular issue, and I haven't talked to her about it. She was at the meeting. I want to hear more people's thoughts about it than just mine.
Right.
And even than just mine and yours, maybe. But we'll let you go to your next meeting. We only have a couple more items to wrap up for the rest of us. But I think it's an interesting idea. I think
I don't want
if
it
it
to
weren't
go-
for the fact that it would take so much time and energy from so few people, I would say
Yes.
it's a no-brainer. It's a positive thing. There's no bad oversight.
Yeah.
I would
It-
highly
it-
guys looking at, do you guys have seen it? And I think it could be a great fit for Highland Park to just like until things improve or the legislature move things forward. I think it's a great place to start.
Yeah.
I would say one last note is I would just say what I would hate to see is for Highland Park to do something like this and then to say, see, this is what we're doing. This is going to work for us. When what we all really want is something much stronger that we can only do with the state support. And so I just think we need to keep that in mind if we go forward with it, is that we're doing it because that's the most that we can do, not because it's what we want to do.
Yep.
All right, I keep saying more things rather than letting you get ready for your next meeting.
Thank you. I'm going to run. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
The only other items that I had on the agenda, I believe, were public comment, which Kai, you may not know. Oh, Kai's still. Mayor left and everybody shuffled around, and I'm not paying attention. You probably don't know this, but we have not had a member of the public actually attend our meetings for quite some number of months now, partly because we keep bouncing the Zoom link around and partly because there just hasn't been a great interest in what we're doing. At least not one that's been expressed to me. Anyway, we don't have any public comment tonight because we don't have any members of the public present. The only other item on the agenda is a discussion of next steps. I don't have any next steps for us other than, I guess I would say, if you haven't already looked at Harry's comprehensive notes of that meeting with Maplewood and taken a spin around Maplewood's website to look at what they're doing with their community oversight group and their quasi-civilian review board, you might want to do that just as a piece of homework. I'm intending to talk to a couple people that I know who are knowledgeable about these things just to see if there's any other perspective we need about that. I also want to talk to Franklin and Norma, who weren't able to attend tonight, just about their reactions to what we heard from Maplewood. Does anybody else, I mean, I guess another homework item is we just need to watch that video of what the mess in Woodbridge. Does anybody else have any next steps for us to consider? Harry.
First, just a bit of housekeeping. Who is still on this group besides Carolyn?
Okay, so the full voting members of the group are the three of us who are here, Kai, Hayden, and myself. Carolyn, end of list.
Is Franklin no longer?
Franklin is an alternate member and Norma is an alternate member.
Okay, is Steve Allard no longer?
Steve Allard does not live in Highland Park anymore.
Ooh, well, that's difficult. Okay.
And Natalie was an alternate, but she had to resign as an alternate because of personal reasons.
Okay.
That's how we were able to keep Norma as an alternate. So that's it. So we have 6 voting member vacancies. And I think I don't know if that's the maximum or that's the minimum that we're supposed to have. It may just be the number we're supposed to have. I think the maximum is 10 and 2 alternates. But we really need to have 10. We've barely been functioning since we lost even a couple of people.
So let me suggest something and you could tell me it's a good idea or a bad idea. I'm wondering if we want to not have a meeting in April and brainstorm about recruitment strategies. and make that would be open to Kai and Hayden as well. But to spend, the limited energy the volunteers here have to help, I try to find some people. I was jotting down some suggestions while we were meeting. I could share them here in the interest of transparency. If people are busy, I could put it in an email, or what would people want?
Whatever you want to do, Harry. I've got a couple more minutes if you want to kick around some
Okay.
ideas.
I'll stick around
But
with
I don't
you
want to
and
keep Hayden and Kai if they're getting tired of this.
It just seemed to right now, because the work and everything's opening up, people going back to work or required to go back to work. My wife just started working back full time 2 weeks ago, and likely I will start, in May 1st. And so I think everything's in flux in a lot of people's working lives at this point, it seems to me, at least from based on my personal, experience here. So I don't know, next month or two could be pretty challenging until things settles down a bit.
Yeah, I would.
My main hesitancy about not having a meeting next month is that then by the time we resurface, we may have lost Hayden, but
I mean, I'll try to hang on as long as possible. You may see me
Kai was
on the
trying to
train, like not talking, but you saw that before.
Kai, you wanted to say something?
You're good. Yeah. I'm just saying I don't know a whole lot of adults. I'm not gonna lie. So I will try to help as much as I can, and like potentially find like another student who might want to help. But I think I can even make like a poster or something. I don't know. But yeah.
there are no bad ideas for recruiting more people to be on this. So
Yeah.
it's not like if you put up a poster and we get 20 students interested, we're just going to put them on the council. We're going to talk to them in the same way that we did to you. So I don't know whether it's poster worthy, but if you want to talk to people who are interested in these issues, now you have a little bit of a flavor of what we do.
Yeah.
Although frankly, this was a little bit more wide ranging of a meeting than we often have.
Yeah.
Because the mayor wanted to hear from us about things that she doesn't always bring up. Anyway, I mean, Harry, did you had particular people that you were thinking of reaching out to, or?
Shall Hayden, Kai, should I just run through a couple ideas?
Sure.
Okay. So I was thinking that we should, and by we, it could be me as the staff person, it could be Jeff, it could be anybody here. I think we should reach out to the area chapter of the NAACP. And that president was Bruce Morgan, who lives in Highland Park. I'm not sure if he still is. I think we should reach out to Pastor Seth, see if members of his church might be interested. We might take a paradoxical turn and ask the HPPD leadership if there are community members that have spoken out, that have seem motivated to be involved in these sort of issues. I'm wondering if apartment complexes might just due to the nature of who resides in apartment complexes, might want to be asked to designate somebody. And then I was thinking of RU faculty who tend to be motivated on some of these issues, who live in town, if we could track down a few and ask them. And the last suggestion, at the risk of overburdening you with my brilliant ideas, is could we enlist a representative of local businesses? Because I remember, Jeff, I think you were in the leadership position at the time, that twice we've had concerns that related to businesses and African-American owned or run groups, and that had encounters that didn't go really south, but were misunderstandings. And so I'm wondering if that would be a smart way to go, is to enlist them, see if we could in something like that. So those
Is
are
there this is a stupid question. I mean, I guess the Main Street group would have some contacts there, but is there there's no Highland Park Chamber of Commerce or something like that, right?
No, Main Street is probably the way.
Main Street is the
go, or just our personal networks. I mean, who we know who are in some of those businesses.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any of those are bad ideas. I mean, I kind of like the business idea, although I'm always skeptical of business interests because of my politics, but like I think in Highland Park it's a little bit different. And I think because the business owner community in Highland Park may be a little bit more diverse than the town itself,
Hmm.
that is an interesting prospect. I do think that maybe I'm wrong, but I think that the members of the council have to be residents. So that may pose some concern if people don't live here, but
Yeah.
I don't know if you wanted to talk to Rebecca or whoever about who would be a good person to approach about this stuff. That would be an interesting idea. I don't know how to, I've never had a good sense of how we uh broadcast things through apartment complexes, other than a postering campaign or something.
I thought about that because I know that River Ridge has like a tenant association.
Mhm.
Right? And so if other apartments have some sort of residents association, that might be a smart place to go. Many of the apartment complexes could also, that could be a surrogate for socioeconomic representation
Mhm.
and other things.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think those are all good ideas. I just don't know. I mean, implementing them, I wouldn't know the first step to take.
All right.
I,
As long as
But
you think
as
they're
if you think they're good ideas, I would say go ahead and implement. I just don't know. I know you have a lot on your plate.
well, one thing, I work at a restaurant in town. So I remember Kevin, who used to be on the council, came in one day and started talking to the manager of the restaurant, and told her about the advisory council and stuff like that. Wrote down his information, and I still have it like stored on my phone and stuff, even though he like is no longer part of the council anymore. So I know that at least like he had that effort of trying to reach out to people in the community, and it was like a proposal of like either sitting in as not necessarily joining, although like I'm sure that no one would be opposed to that, but at least sitting in as a member of the public or something.
Mhm.
I think,
Yeah,
and
we had done an initiative, just to catch you up, Kai. We had done we used to be split into 4 working groups, and one of them was communications and outreach. And
yeah,
Kevin was the sort of facilitator of that group. And one of the efforts they were making was trying to reach out to business owners and people who work in the businesses to to have them participate in like a focus group or like just a small panel discussion or something, just about what their ideas of public safety are. And it was going to be what their ideas of a civilian review board should look like and things like that. And it kind of stopped because we lost almost all of the members of the communications working group over the course of a couple months.
yeah.
But it's I mean, obviously one way to do it is to have somebody go door to door to all the different businesses and say, hey, are you interested in this? That's just, that's a fair time commitment to ask somebody to participate in.
Yeah, but also I feel like there should, if that were to be done, which I think is a good idea, assuming that someone would be able to take that responsibility, or multiple
Mhm.
people would, is having like specifics or like a planned time or something. Or because what happened when Kevin came to the restaurant is that my boss, she seemed pretty receptive to the idea, but it was based off, here's my number, call me if you're interested, instead of
Mhm.
like, here's what you can do to get involved
Yeah, put it
specifically.
on
So
your
it kind of,
calendar now. Yeah.
yeah, so it kind of like put the initiative onto the business owner. And I feel like a lot of times, if all the things that are going on in your life, you're not going to think, I'm going to go out of my way to schedule a meeting with someone rather than being
Yeah.
invited to something.
That's exactly right.
So I would say that like there should be some sort of way to invite someone to something rather than say, here is an opportunity for you
Mhm.
to establish a meeting with me.
That's a good point. I do think it's a little bit different request when you're asking somebody to actually join our group, because then you're asking them to commit some time to attend meetings like this and also to do more work in between the meetings. But I think it's a good idea. I think we should think about it.
Yeah, or it wouldn't necessarily have to be like a full meeting thing. Like as you said
Mhm.
before, people were doing focus groups or collecting
Mhm.
opinions. If you didn't want it to be a meeting, if you wanted it to be like a survey or something, you could say, here's like a here's a form or something, or
Mhm.
just like something more concrete. So then
Yeah.
people have a particular thing to do rather than leaving it very open-ended, because then even
Yeah.
if you're receptive to the idea, that doesn't necessarily get you anywhere.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I don't know, that's what I said.
All right, so Jeff, are we scheduling a meeting in April or are we
Um,
focusing on recruitment in April?
I mean, do we really think there's that much of a chance of getting like 2 or 3 more members before our April meeting? Because if I thought that if we were going to have 7 or 8 members by then, I would say, yeah, let's have a meeting. But I think look, I don't think anything that we're doing, other than maybe the exception of this whole Proud Boys thing, which could pop up at any time, is going to change that much if we wait a month to have our next meeting. I just don't want to. I mean, I feel like we lost a little bit of momentum by not having a February meeting, but right now I don't think we have any momentum. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think we should have an April meeting?
I personally don't think it would hurt. I mean, even if you don't have like a whole lot of momentum, like I feel like you don't gain momentum by not meeting again. So
Okay.
I would go.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Okay.
Hayden, I mean, even if it turns out to be the 3 of us or the 3 of us and Carolyn, is it? I mean, we'll try to keep it shorter for sure.
So I'll schedule an April.
Yeah, let's
meeting.
just
It'll
keep
be
it on the
April
schedule.
11th. So that's the second Monday night in the month. All right, and I intend to send that out shortly.
All right.
All right, thank you all.
Okay. Well, then I will move to adjourn.
I second that.
All right. All in favor of adjourning? Here, you can vote on this one, Kai. There, you voted. All right. We're done. Thanks, Harry.
Thank you. Okay, have a good night.
Bye.
Good night.